Welcome everybody. Today we have a fireside chat setting between Rolf, that you all know, and Paul Misener. And I keep on forgetting the full length of your title, so I'm not going to do it. But I'm going to ask you to actually explain your title in like a minute. When you.
It's not enough time.
Paul is a long time. You were by your colleagues just called Amazon dinosaur. 19 years in the company?
Yeah, in my 20th, right?
Yeah. In the 20th year of Amazon. A lot of experience, in charge of culture. We're really glad you're here. I just heard you actually picked Düsseldorf in this event as the anchor to plan a couple of things in Europe around. So it's a great honor actually for you to be here. And I would like to invite you to the chairs together with Rolf to actually have an open conversation. And
I think you will start with some opening.
Yeah, you're the boss. I'll do whatever you say.
Okay, with an opening
We would really love to hear.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy
Thank
to
you,
do
Paul.
it. Thanks so much. Yes. So this is only just a little bit intimidating, right? It's not just a matter of hanging out with some new friends here and talking in the late afternoon, but it's also coming here as an innovation guy talking to you guys who know a thing or two about innovation yourselves, and so it's humbling to be in a position to talk a little bit about my own organization's approach to innovation, which I will do in a sec here. But please take it with the recognition that I have that you guys are a hyper innovative organization yourselves. And so if there's any learning to be done here, I hope it's something that I can absorb from you, not only as individuals, but sort of from the energy in the room and all the great ideals that you have. Now, a couple of years ago, I went to one of these innumerable conferences that I have to attend, and there was a New York Times reporter who was the guest speaker, and the guest speaker in usual guest speaker fashion, talks a lot about himself. And one of the things he was talking about, he was sort of plugging his new book. So he had just written a new book. And this was a collection, more or less, of columns that he had written in this newspaper over a span of about 5 years. And the specific theme of these columns was interviewing the boss. What this reporter would do is go and sit down with the boss of largely commercial enterprises, but sometimes public sector enterprises, and talk to them not about the latest thing the business was doing, not about products and services and all the cool things that they want to try to sell, but rather what the management style is. They want to understand how do you run the company? What's your method? And so he was explaining how inevitably, when you bring in a New York Times reporter in to see the CEO, they always bring in the PR person. And the PR person is there to protect the boss from saying bad things or silly things, to keep the boss on the straight path. And so this New York Times reporter would always ask, one of the stock questions was, do you have a set of principles or tenets by which you operate the company? Do you have any general principles that you adhere to, but also require your entire company to adhere to? And the boss inevitably would say something like, oh, yes, quality, and customer is always right, and timeliness, speed. And then would look over at the PR person and say, what are the other ones? And so the point is this, that the boss rarely knows all these ideas, these principles by which everyone in the company is supposed to be operating. And so it was really very cool to see your set of principles. What are they called now? The goals? The values. Okay, the values, trivago. These values are really ones that get discussion. And I actually had a sidebar here a little while ago talking about how Amazon's set of values, very similar match up against trivago's. And I've actually allotted myself time on the train tomorrow to Frankfurt to do the matrix, to actually compare the two and see what we could learn at Amazon from trivago and where there are differences and where we've missed something at Amazon. We do have 14 what we call leadership principles. And to be clear, these are not principles that are somehow only applicable to leaders in the company, senior people, but everybody, all 600,000+ of us are required at some level to abide by these leadership principles. And they really do guide how we think about the culture, the business of being Amazon and what we do at Amazon. And one of the really cool things about it is that we've never taken them to be religious, in the sense that we're not ever in the position of trying to claim that these are philosophically correct, right, on stone tablets somewhere. They're just happen to be the way we do things at Amazon. And so there's not a sense that we know better than everybody else in the world. It really is just, hey, we've decided that this is the way we're going to be as a group of people, come together, doing our jobs at Amazon, and we want to all work in the same fashion. And so these leadership principles guide really everything in what we do. They also guide the hiring process at Amazon, which can be a little bit grueling, but by incorporating these principles into the hiring process, we're ensuring that the people who come into the company have demonstrated to those of us already in the company that they have at least practiced some of these leadership principles already in their careers and their lives. But it also requires the people who want to come work at Amazon to self-select into the culture. Right, so it's not a matter of they come to the company and they have to learn the culture, or it has to be beaten into them, or they reluctantly. No, they've self-selected because they know right up front in that interview process what we're about inside the company. And again, it's not the right way. It doesn't mean that somebody can't have a great, successful career elsewhere. That's not the point at all. It's rather, if you decide to go and work at Amazon, you know what you're getting into. Okay, so we have these 14 leadership principles. They developed over some time. And so, as mentioned, I am an old-timer in my 20th year. And in the early days, they weren't so much written down as they are today. So Jeff and others and those of us who've been around for a while had some input into these when they were being developed. And there used to be a little tagline, almost an asterisk, or it was actually a parenthetical in italics, below these things that were called leadership principles. There was this tagline that says, unless you know other ones, or it got changed a little bit later to, unless you know better ones. Okay. Well, it no longer exists as a tagline next to the leadership principles, not because we don't mean that we invite modifications to these leadership principles. It just means that they're not optional, right? So the tagline was initially misinterpreted to mean that, well, if I know some better ones, I don't need to abide by these ones. Well, that's not the case. The idea is that if you do know better ones, take them to Jeff. Go, hey, Jeff, this one really doesn't work anymore, or this really should be changed, or whatever. And that's how they did change over time in those days. They actually did morph over time because people did suggest things to Jeff, and Jeff came up with new ones and so forth. But in the context of innovation at Amazon, 3 of these leadership principles really stick out to me. And I'll walk you through these. Before we do that, though, I want to impress upon you the way we think about innovation at Amazon. We really like to think of the company as being an invention machine, a machine. And the way I do this with my boys, I have, they're no longer very young, they're 13 and 17, but they're these boys, and I used to trick them into say, well, I'm going to grant you one wish, what do you wish for? And then, as boys will be boys, they always want something, a thing, and they're not quite at the stage of asking for things like world peace or ending hunger or curing disease. They want something tangible. And but I always say, you get one wish. What do you want? And then they answer. The correct answer that they've learned now, because I've sort of beaten this into them, is, well, if anybody ever asks you if you can have any one wish, ask for more wishes. So ask for 10 wishes, ask for 100 wishes, ask for unlimited wishes. Well, if you would want unlimited wishes if you're granted a wish. What if you were to invent a machine? Any machine you could possibly invent, what would you invent? You would invent an invention machine, a machine that makes other inventions indefinitely. And so we've actually done this at Amazon. I'm going to talk to you about it. You may borrow our invention machine if this suits you. The idea is this. It's kind of like a Turing machine. It has input, it has an algorithm, and it has output. So the input at Amazon is our focus, our purpose, the reason for the machine, the reason for the company, and it's customer obsession. I hope if any of you are Amazon customers, you recognize that this is really core to how we behave as a company. I interviewed with Jeff in October of '99, and I remember that he had already been sort of famous for talking about customer obsession and the way he described what the business was about and what he was doing. And frankly, I had wondered going into that meeting whether it was mostly a marketing thing. Because of course you're going to obsess about customers. Who would say that they're not customer obsessive? Oh, we don't care about customers. Who would ever say that? But the fact of the matter is we really do obsess over customers, and it really is the guiding principle. So there are 14 of these leadership principles, if I mentioned, but the one and only that sticks out above the other 13 is this customer obsession. And so that really is the purpose. Now, it manifests itself within the context of innovation and something we call the working backwards process. And if those of you who have hung out with Amazon Web Services a little bit, you probably have heard about this, but let me describe it for you. The idea is this, that if we have an idea Today, we have an idea for a new product or service that we want to offer sometime in the future, like 6 months, 2 years, 5 years from now. Today, we'll sit down and write out the press release announcing it. The press release to go out 6 months, 2 years, 5 years from now, we'll write it today. Okay, what does that do for you? Well, first of all, it's in writing, so it's a commitment. So you've decided as a team that you want to do something, new product or service for customers sometime in the future. You've written it down, so you're committed to it. How many times have we walked out of a meeting having decided something, and 3 or 4 weeks later we say, well, that's kind of hard. Maybe we didn't really mean that. Let's do this other thing that seems a little bit easier. Well, no, this is actually a commitment. This is what we want to do for our customers. Second, because it is a press release, it's written in customer language. It's what's in it for her. What does she get out of it when the product or service is available to her? It doesn't say, oh, we had to design this algorithm and we got this new process that we're working on and we had to access this database. It doesn't say any of that. What it says is what is in it for her, not how we did it. They don't care how. You all are undoubtedly customers of a bank, let's say. Banks. If you walk into a bank or you check out a bank on your mobile app, whatever you're doing, however you interface with them, and they're offering you a new service. And you look at this service and you kind of read about it and you say, no, okay, that works for me. That's kind of cool. I'll take this service. Do you ever stop and think that that service is only available to you because people were working nights and weekends for 3 months? Do you ever sit there and worry about how their social lives were interrupted while they were producing this great product for you? No, you're selfish. We're all selfish. You think about, what's in it for me? Is this a good thing for me, or do I want it, or do I not? It's that simple. Customers care about what. They really don't care about the how you got it to them. Last, but you've written down, you've committed yourselves to doing something. Second, you've written it in customer language because that's the what they care about, not the how. Third, and I think this is the most, sublime aspect of this whole press release writing exercise, is that by writing a press release today for a product or service that's going to be popping out many months or years from now, you're admitting that what you want to do today is not possible. It's impossible. If it were possible, you'd write the press release today and send it out in the morning or early next week once you run past the PR shop. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that you would write a press release for something you can already do and then send it out 2 years from now. You're recognizing that what you want to do is not possible. So you have to figure out how to do it. You have to invent your way from today to that press release. That's one manifestation of that customer obsession, because ultimately everything we're doing, all the things we're working on are designed to get to the point of that new product or service for customers. And by the way, I picture this circumstance. And some people live in fear of the boss, some people live in fear of customers. I live in fear of customers. And here's how I picture it. I'm in my office, and there's a knock at the door. The door is closed. And I say, come in. In walks a customer, and she says, what are you working on? And I say, well, doing some email. And I've got a report that I'm going to deliver in about an hour. I've got 3 conference calls later in the day, and I'm going to do some more email tonight. And she says, well, what are you doing for me? I'm your customer and you're doing email? What? I don't understand. What's the connection to me? I'm your customer. Why aren't you serving me? If I cannot explain to her why the emails, the conference calls, the meetings, the reports, all that stuff that I'm doing is actually beneficial to her, I've got a serious problem. That means I'm not doing my job. I am not obsessing over my customer. So I have in my desk drawer, depending on how you count now, either 5 or 6, but let's call them 5 press releases of things that I'm working on, thinking about, anticipating for customers in the future. How many will actually get out as press releases? Probably 1, if I'm lucky, 2. The others are just there as sort of my internal aspirations, how I'm going to figure out something on behalf of customers. And so, customer walks in the door, knocks on the door. She says, what are you working on? I tell her about the email and the meetings, and she's unimpressed. And I pull out this piece of paper, and I say, here. She reads it, and she says, oh, okay, that's what you're working on for me. Okay, good. Go back to your email, right? And if you cannot do that, if you cannot write down and articulate in customer language what you're doing today is leading to something you're going to provide that what to a customer in the future, that's a serious problem. So I would encourage everyone in the room to go off and write your own press release. You don't have to show it to anybody. Just it'll allow you to articulate for yourself and anticipate that hypothetical customer coming into your office who's going to ask you what you're working on. You need to be able to, at least mentally, be able to be prepared for her to say that this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it for you. Okay. The other way we sort of keep the innovative spirit at Amazon after growing to a fairly large size, I think the number now is over 600,000 employees worldwide. The numbers are a little bit bewildering, in part because as an insider, I don't see that much change. It doesn't feel like things have changed all that much since 1999. Obviously, there's scale and scope things that have happened, but those are much more externally, not just externally visible, but externally focused upon, right? So the pundits out there, the media and the investment community, competitors, governments, everybody wants to talk about Amazon's different than they, and from the insider's perspective, it's really not true. It feels very much the same as it always did. And there's a mechanism we use for keeping us small and innovative. One is called the 2 Pizza Team. And it sounds like a cute name, the tech company, 2 pizzas and all that. But the whole purpose of the 2 Pizza Team is to bring together a small group of individuals to address new challenges and opportunities for the company. And so the idea is this, that whenever we face a new challenge or opportunity, the initial group of individuals that is assembled to address the new challenge or opportunity should be comfortably fed with 2 extra large pizzas. Okay, well, that sounds kind of cute, but why don't we just give a number to it? Why don't we just say it's 8 people come together and address every new challenge or opportunity? Well, that doesn't provide much flexibility. You want to be able to add expertise if you need it. So say the 8 people are working along, and 3 months or 4 months into this particular project, we're assessing a challenge or opportunity, you discover that, we really need an expert in machine learning. We don't have an expert, a machine learning expert on the team. There's a woman down the hall who is an expert. She's available. She's just come off another project. She wants to join your team, but you can't let her join because that would be 9 people. Well, that's stupid. Of course you're going to bring her onto the team. She's going to join the team. She's going to add her expertise, and the team's going to be much better for it, and you'll have 9 people. And that's why there's no cap like that. But here's the problem. And this is borne out by sort of psychological science studies that show that basically humans can't maintain a number of communications channels that exceeds on the order of 10 or 12 in any one context. And so in the context of a single team, if you get to the point where there are a dozen people in the team, suddenly the team can no longer truly function as a single unit. It necessarily fragments. And so we have this notion that once you get past 2 pizzas worth of people, then it's going to be too many people because then it defeats the purpose. No longer does it behave as a team. So that's the 2 pizza rule. That happens in Amazon. So there you have it. That's sort of the purpose, the input of our machine. The algorithm of the machine is, I think, really where the secret sauce is. The algorithm of the machine relies on, it's in my title, it's innovation. But innovation, of course, relies on experimentation. And experimentation requires the possibility of failure. Now, every one of us in this class, I'm sure, had some sort of a science class. Just no matter what your ultimate major and career path was, you probably had like a biology or chemistry or physics class at some point. And you had a lab. And in the lab, you conducted experiments. And those experiments involved, I don't know, involved rolling a ball down an inclined plane, or mixing some things and heating them up and it turns blue. And if it turned blue, you succeeded and the teacher is happy. If it turned green, do it again. That's not an experiment. Even though you were told this was an experiment, that is not an experiment because the teacher knew how it was supposed to turn out. If you were a good student, if you were a chemistry major, you knew how it was supposed to turn out too. But no, the teacher knew that was not an experiment. True experiments mean that you don't know how it's going to turn out. And therefore, there's always the possibility that there's going to be failure involved. And so at Amazon, what we're focused on is when we're innovating, actually doing something truly new that has never been done before, it's going to involve experimentation. And that necessitates the possibility of failure. So we accept failure at Amazon in the context of experimentation. As I mentioned before, failure does not mean you failed to set your alarm clock and you didn't do the report and you haven't looked at your email for 3 weeks. That's not the kind of failure I'm talking about. I'm talking about failure where you tried something that's never been done before, you thought it was going to turn out one way and it didn't turn out that way. It didn't work, or it was substandard, or you don't think ultimately the customers would like it, and therefore it was a failure. That's okay. And it's not only okay, it's expected. In fact, it's not only expected, you're expected to try to make your ideas fail. We all suffer as human beings from confirmation bias, right? We all like to have an idea and then look around and pick up little tidbits of information here and there that support our idea. Oh, I'm so smart. That confirmed what I was thinking earlier. To combat confirmation bias, we actually require that people in the company actively work to, and this is how the phrase goes, work to disconfirm their beliefs. So think about it. You're actually required to try to make your idea fail. I mean, it's not like okay if it fails if you're trying and experimenting. You actually have to try to make it fail. And so the scientist in me, I was an astrophysicist before becoming an electrical engineer, before becoming a lawyer. And so in astrophysics, one of the most revered sets of theories was Einstein's general theory of relativity. It's about 102, 3 years old right now. For the past century, the best scientific minds in the world have been focused on Einstein and doing experiments around general relativity. And after a century of experiments and attempts and tests, Einstein has never, ever, not even once, been proven right. He's never been proven right. You can't prove a scientific theory to be correct. You can only prove it to be incorrect. And the fact that all these attempts have been made to try to disprove it, and they have failed to make it fail, means that it has some likely representation of reality and embedded in general relativity. The point is this, that if you've got an idea, an experiment, and you're thinking about deploying a new product or service to customers, try to make it fail. Try really hack at it and see if it survives. If it survives all your attempts to make it fail, it's not a guarantee that it actually will succeed. There's no guarantee like that. You can't prove it to be right. But if you have failed to make it fail, you can have a high degree of confidence that this is something that ultimately will be accepted by customers. Now, there's a reason why I carry around an iPhone. And the reason is because Amazon's phone didn't really work out so well. This was about 5 years ago, and I think we sold the phone for about 8 months. And we thought it was kind of cool. It had some really neat features in it. One of the features was that if you put it on a table, you could walk around it and see three-dimensional views. Doesn't that sound cool? Anyway, right. So the laughter suggests that it wasn't maybe that cool, but we ended up taking a $170 million write-down on this. Obviously, it was not a commercial success. But the failure of the Fire Phone, which it was called, was not the commercial failure. It was not the $170 million. Money is money. It was that it went out to customers. Our customers experienced this phone, and they didn't like it. That was the failure. That's what hurt. We old-time Amazonians really were pained by this because it was a failure experienced firsthand by customers. They got something, they trusted us, they thought it was going to be really cool and work like we promised. It didn't quite. The $170 million we'll take any day of the week. It was the getting out to customers. And so I guess my point is this, that when you're experimenting and failing, as you will do if you're actually experimenting, actually innovating, you want to keep it from your customers. There are degrees of failure. So we have had, and Jeff personally takes credit for billions of dollars of failure. I'm sure he's right. But most of that failure, virtually all of it, has been behind the scenes. It never got out to customers. And so we spent money experimenting with something, and it turned out not to work, and we decided not to do it. Now, there have been some major Amazon products and services that have been things that we really couldn't fully experiment with behind the scenes. I think that the principal example is Amazon Prime. Here's a service, I hope some of you know about it, but it's basically, it started out as an annual subscription fee for free shipping, free 2-day shipping on millions of items. That's where it started, and now it's actually grown to something larger than that. But we didn't really know if our customers were going to like it. And it was a leap of faith on our part. And here's how it went. We did try to do some financial analysis on this to see if this would work, but we really could never develop an equation that would take the financial aspect of it, which was our shipping costs, and compare that to the trust and convenience aspect of it for customers. It was hard to quantify that latter piece to be able to compare it with the financials. And if you look back at our annual reports in the 2007 and 8 timeframe, there's some really big 3-digit numbers inside of parentheses. And those 3-digit numbers inside of parentheses weren't investments in, I don't know, infrastructure or a building or a new product that if it didn't quite work out, there'd still be some return. There'd be, it'd be a non-zero outcome. And so maybe pennies on the dollar, but at least it was something that would be left. No, this was money that was going out to DHL. We were just writing these big checks, and we would never see this money again. This was gone money. And yet, we were having to spend that to get that 2-day shipping to our customers based on their small subscription fees. And so we really didn't know if it was going to work. Ultimately, it did, which is good news. But the analysis that went into it was very much a qualitative customer analysis. It was basically saying customers back in the early 2000s were going to websites, including Amazon's, and they were seeing a product that they wanted to purchase. They were seeing a price associated with that product. And then after they were comfortable with the price and the product, they would have to enter in their shipping information, and they have to enter in their payment information, and they get, lots of screens later, they'd get down, and then they'd see the total price with the shipping. And sometimes the shipping was big, and the customers would be very frustrated. This is a terrible customer experience to put them through this, to get all the way down to the end to find out what the prices that you would want to be able to compare to an offline purchase. When you walk into a high street store and you see a price, that's the price. You recognize that you're going to have to pay VAT or sales tax or whatever it is on it. Everybody does that, but that's going to be a constant figure determined by government people. The shipping cost, however, is not present in that thing in the offline world. And so to have it present but only available after you've gone through this long period of time on the website was a bad customer experience. So we just figured that the shipping cost that we would have to eat would pay for the customer trust engendered. And it worked out. Another similar example of an experiment that we really didn't know whether it was going to work was AWS. This is Amazon Web Services, our cloud computing business. Nobody was coming to us in 2004 and 2005 and saying, gee, Amazon, we're really sick of buying computer hardware and leasing software, and we don't want to do this anymore. Would you please provide computing as a service? Nobody was coming to anybody, least of all this online bookseller, to do that, to saying, please, develop cloud computing. And yet we figured that customers would like this. Enterprise customers were probably going through a lot of the same things that we were internally at Amazon, where you would have product development teams, and every one of the product development teams needed their own database engineer. Well, that's stupid and redundant and wasteful. So we said, well, if it's a problem for us, maybe it's going to be a problem for other people. And so that was the birth of Amazon Web Services and cloud computing. Again, it was a bet. We really didn't have any good information about whether or not it was going to pay off. So that's the algorithm. It's really that innovation based on experimentation and a willingness to fail. So the input, the algorithm, the output. Well, the output is the result, because ultimately, all the obsessing over customers, all the being innovative on their behalf isn't going to matter at all to them if they don't actually see a product or service. So you actually have to do the operational side of things. You actually have to deliver the result. And when it comes to making decisions about what we want to deliver, we actually have a bunch of internal methods, and one of which seems incredibly mundane, but it's super helpful. One that's worthy of trying, and again is almost costless, like writing the press release is more or less costless. Any decision inside of Amazon of any kind of importance, from the mid-levels all the way up to Jeff, relies on prose narratives. We actually ban bullet point presentations in the context of decision making. You're not allowed, just flat out, it's just absolutely banned. And the reason why is not because bullet points are inherently bad, but because they're inherently vague. They don't promote deep thinking by authors, and they're also very difficult to interpret when they're up there on the screen, especially if you're in a meeting with sort of a variety of different management levels. So you can have sort of a vague 5-word bullet point. First to market strategy. And what the author meant is that the competitors have been trying first-to-market strategy and it hasn't worked for them, and then the fast follow seems to be the better way to do things, whatever. But the boss says, oh, first-to-market strategy, we should have that. And everybody's like, oh, she just said that, didn't she? Well, okay, that's what must be, what we want, right? Because it's first-to-market strategy because the boss wants it. She said it. Well, that's a very bad way of running a meeting. That gets people at cross purposes. They don't understand the true meaning of what the proponent of an idea wanted to do is lost. And so we actually force the proponents of a new idea at Amazon to write out narratives. These are called 6 pages within Amazon because that's the limit, the cap. And it turns out that virtually everyone takes all 6 pages. It has a way of expanding to 6 pages. But the point is that 6 pages can be read in about 30 minutes. That's important because hour-long meetings are scheduled to make any kind of decision at Amazon. So the decision makers are brought together. For the first half hour of that hour-long meeting, it's done in total silence. People just read the narrative. Well, it turns out that that's incredibly efficient. It doesn't sound like it's efficient because you've wasted half the meeting reading. No, it's actually extremely efficient because how many times have we gone to meetings where there was homework to be done and some people did it, other people may not have done it, or they did it while riding their bike, or they did it while walking down the hall coming to the meeting, or they did it 3 weeks ago because they were really ambitious. They read it and they don't remember it. It was 3 weeks ago. By doing it in the first half of a meeting, everybody is at the same spot intellectually. They're at the spot of making a decision. And it turns out that the last half of the meeting is super efficient because everyone's thought of everybody's on the same page. And hopefully, if it's a fairly well-written narrative, the proponent has anticipated questions. I mean, how many times have we been in a PowerPoint, sorry, Microsoft, but how many times have we been in a bullet point presentation, and on slide 4, we've got a question, but the presenter is going on and on and on, and the presenter gets to slide 26 before it's answered. Well, everybody else in the room has missed out, has not been paying attention to slides 25 through 23, or 5 through 23, simply because they were focused on the question they had on slide 4. Well, if everybody has to read a document before any questions are asked, hopefully the question is already anticipated and answered in the document. Another important part of decision-making at Amazon, and I think this is something that is lost in large organizations, especially large organizations that weren't always large or that haven't been large for long, and Amazon's one of them. We subdivide every decision we make into 2 types. I mean, divide it in 2. There are only 2 types. Type 1 are what Jeff calls one-way doors. I'm an electrical engineer, so I think of them as diodes. But the point is this, that once you do something, once you've taken the decision, it's really hard to undo it. So you go through that door, and if it's not locked, you have to beat it down or whatever the metaphor, we could take this for a while. But the point is that if you do it, it's really hard, if not impossible, to undo it. Those kinds of decisions, you want essentially all the information you can gather. Maybe it's like, 90-95% of the information that would be available. You need that information. You got to really think about it because you've committed. Once you do it, it's going to be really hard to undo it. So take your time. The vast majority of decisions, though, at a company or an enterprise like Amazon are not one-way doors. They're reversible. If you do something and it doesn't turn out, stop doing it. Just stop. In that case, speed is the key. So if there is a reversible decision that you are about to make, it's much more important to make it fast than wait for all the information. And I think the trap that a lot of large enterprises fall into is that they treat every decision inside the company as being that first kind. We need thousands of meetings to make this decision. We need reams of paper. You don't. You don't. If it's a reversible decision, get some data. Think about it. Does it make some sense? Go do it. Doesn't work out? Stop doing it. That's simple. Makes you much more agile, makes you much more fast. So delivering those results is a hard thing to do. Sometimes it's the more mundane and boring part of innovation and providing new products and services to a company. But ultimately, that's what matters to customers. And so you have to do it. You have to make those decisions, and you have to do the operational side of things. And I think that's pretty much how our invention machine works at Amazon. And Rolf, do you want to just jump in here, and we can talk about other things if you want, or like go on for hours?
Let's go on.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I could definitely go on listening to you for hours.
Oh.
So I think it was really inspiring. It was really also nice to hear that there are a lot of similarities, I think.
Yeah.
And actually, you answered a lot of my questions already. So like I have a long list of questions, but you answered all of them nearly. Head of innovation. Being head of innovation of like maybe the most innovative company in the world, or at least one of the most innovative companies in the world, is that sometimes a burden?
Not at all. And let me clarify what my role is. I am one of 600,000 plus innovators at Amazon. So frequently I'm asked, where's the secret innovation team? Where's the skunk works, as one company used to call their innovation unit? We don't have such a thing. Everyone is required to be innovative. And people do it at different levels and with different levels of sophistication and technical difficulty and such. We practice Kaizen, for example. And Kaizen is a technique developed by Toyota in the 1980s. And the two basic parts of Kaizen are incremental improvements, that's one part. So you just small changes that make a difference at scale. And there's companies that are now, yours and mine, are both operating at scale. So little improvements can go a long way. If we take 2 seconds out of the movement of a box throughout a warehouse, if we take away those 2 seconds forevermore on every package, that's a whole lot of savings of time. That's months and months, if not years of saving within a year, just of moving boxes around. And so incremental improvements, then imitation is the other half of Kaizen. And so you are aware of a process, maybe within the company, maybe somewhere else, and you just imitate it. You deploy it creatively. And so those are areas in which everyone, including those who work on warehouse floors, are required to be innovative and inventive. Innovation more broadly in the kind of, I have 3 patents. This is a small number of patents compared to the really big brains in the company who have, 10x or 100x what I've got. But that's just one measure of how we think about and go about innovation in the company. And so everybody is doing it. That's the point.
But it's interesting, no? So I think when you would have asked somebody, 10 years ago, or maybe even today, when you would ask somebody and to draw a comic of somebody and let's say, okay, draw the head of innovation. Basically, they would have drawn you with a light bulb on top of your head, right? So people think about innovation as something very individual. And though today, the most innovative companies are those that are like innovating systems, right?
Yeah.
So you spoke a lot about culture. And you are the head of innovation, and you speak basically about culture, and you speak about systems. It's a mind change, right? That happened maybe in the last 20 years or so since you were there.
I think that's right, and part of what goes on here is what is one of the most important life lessons, I think, in any aspect of our lives, personal and business and educational, et cetera. And that is, life is rarely black and white. It's almost always lived in the gray, and so whenever, especially enterprises like public sector institutions, which have their own inertia around them, they have different kinds of constraints than private sector businesses do. They're worried about how can we be innovative. We can't possibly be like a Trivago. They can't be like an Amazon. They cannot be innovative. And I say, no. You don't have to flip a switch. It's not like you're either not and then you suddenly are. Likewise, within a company, it's not like someone is not innovative and then somebody over here is the innovation guy with the light bulb. It's everywhere in between. And so it's always constantly encouraging just a little bit more. You can do better tomorrow. You can be more innovative tomorrow. And I've given you a few little ideas of techniques that you can use. I mean, as I say, these are costless ideas. The 6-pager, the working backwards press release. I mean, what's the harm in trying those?
Yeah. So if that's true, so if today more or less you create systems, you create a culture, and you create rules, not rules. We don't like so much rules at Trivago, but systems on top of culture. So if that is one of the major success criteria for Amazon, and I heard that from many people in the Amazon organization. I heard somebody saying, yes, it's always amazing if you have a genius like Jeff on top, right? But at the end, why Amazon is successful is the culture and is the systems. So do you see other companies that have a culture and a system and this culture is a reason why they're successful?
Well, I mentioned the New York Times reporter in this guy's book for a reason, because I see that you personally and you as company leadership are pursuing the same kinds of cultural attention that is necessary. Culture just doesn't happen, and a mistake that a lot of enterprises come to is that they end up trying to describe their culture as opposed to creating it. Describing your culture is accidental. It's post hoc, the lawyer in me would say. It's after the fact. You're talking about what has already happened. Whereas your actively trying to imbue a culture into your organization in a way that is obviously paying off, but is also something that takes effort. It takes attention, and I think you're very right to think about it and put time into it. Jeff does think about these things, and I think, like you are very aware that culture matters, and it ultimately matters how well you're able to serve your customers.
I think one very interesting thing that you said was, we don't say these are the right ones, and the others are wrong, but these are right for us. I thought that it's very interesting, because I think that's like, you can't transfer like all of the different things from one company to another. No? So I mean, we can look at Amazon and you can see like, this is really interesting, and we can say, okay, how does it relate to us? But we cannot just take it, because it's not the identity. It's not our identity. You have your identity, and I think probably it's important that a company stays close to their identity. Like, when you compare yourself, for example, there's another, maybe like you could also say, maybe Google is successful because of their culture they're having, which is different than yours, but they also have a culture. What would you say makes you different, Like, what makes you unique? What gives you identity when you compare your culture from the Google culture? Because they also have something like, failing, is probably important, or like, and where is the Amazon identity?
Yeah, so we spend very little time thinking about other companies, and so it's, wow, that provoked a response. Did I miss something? There must be a story here, but the idea is this: that we're aware of competition, we're aware of what our competitors are doing, but we're not focused on them in any meaningful sense, including about what their culture is. Look. Here's a funny thing: we're a publicly traded company. We've had a level of scrutiny that has been applied to us from the investment side of things, probably more than just about any other company, and certainly.
I just looked it up. It was end of 1999. You were there already, right?
Yeah.
When did you start?
I was hired as outside counsel in October of '99,
okay.
And my badge was issued in February of 2000.
So I hope your stock options have been issued there. No, I don't.
Yeah.
So they were around 100, right? So you probably remember. 99, something like this.
I remember how low it got.
Yeah, and then it got to 7.
Less than $6.
Yeah, less than $6. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's now whatever it is.
Yeah.
But see,
you're doing well.
Right. But this is actually an important point, because one of the things that Jeff taught us early on was, if you feel good about yourself when the stock goes up, you need to feel bad about yourself when the stock goes down. Otherwise, you're just being inconsistent and not true to your own self. So we really don't pay attention. I mean, at least us old-time Amazonians just are blissfully unaware of where the shares are. And partly because we went through this period. It was late, 2001, 2002 time frame, around there, that it was really, we were going to run out of money. That was the storyline. So Amazon was going to go broke. We had this debt analyst, a guy, I remember his name, I won't repeat it, but I remember his name, and he was all over us saying how this was going to be a failed company, and we were Amazon.bomb and all these other things. And this is not designed to be a I told you so kind of a moment, because we didn't know for sure. No one could foresee the future 20 years out. But at the same time, what we saw internally that external audiences didn't see was, we saw the customer satisfaction. We saw the growth rates on the top line. Bottom line was terrible. Bottom line was below zero for a long time after I joined the company. But still, that top line continued to grow, and we were seeing the customer satisfaction. And so we knew that we were doing something right, even though the share price was wherever it was. And so I think it's that kind of a focus, always wondering what your customers are thinking. And if they're happy with you, then you'll be fine. So I've lived through many bad quarterly reports, a lot of really good quarterly reports, some that I just shake my head at and say, what is this? But here's my pet peeve about reporting by the financial media. They'll say company X saw their shares increase by 5% today because they had a great quarter. And like, well, okay, maybe they had a great quarter financially, maybe it turned out that way, but whatever they did for their customers in that quarter was based on decisions that they made 3 or 4 years ago, not this quarter. That was a long time ago that they made decisions that are finally either paying off or failing years later. And so to the people who would want to be fast followers, to people who would want to see what the competition is doing and then try to do it well or do it slightly better, recognize that if you're following your competition, you're necessarily already 3 or 4 years behind.
True. Well, you're telling that. You spoke about, I think, one very interesting aspect. You spoke about the two-pizza team, and also along these lines, when I was meeting you in Seattle, we spoke a lot about autonomy. Because we spoke about it because we said, okay, can you organize? Or we spoke to your colleagues and said, okay, we are here. Can you organize that we can, basically like do this together and do that together and so on? And then often the response came that we can't, because these are independent units. They run independently. They take the decisions. So and it was like for me like really like one of the most kind of rigid examples of like autonomy. Giving units within the company autonomy. There are a lot of people who say autonomy is basically the big enemy of efficiency. What would you answer to that?
Yeah, I'd say it's not black and white.
Mm-hmm.
So what I just said a few minutes ago, prescient that I was, is that in the gray area in between anarchy and I don't know what, uniformity or top-down direction only, there's so many different grades of behavior. And so you want autonomy, you don't want anarchy, you don't want people just doing whatever for whatever reason they feel like it, because you're an enterprise. You're a group of people that have come together with a shared purpose. And that shared purpose cannot possibly be served if everybody is doing whatever and not talking to one another autonomously. It just doesn't work for any human endeavor. And so it feels like there is a balance to be drawn. And our balance within Amazon is drawn around how what we're doing would serve customers. And so the leadership principles that we have, for example, are 14. Sometimes they conflict. There are circumstances when you read one and then you read another and you're in a circumstance and you're forced to choose between the two. That's okay. Because remember, this isn't religion. You're not going to hell because you did one and not the other, right? This is a matter of making a conscious decision which one you're going to follow in this circumstance and recognize that you're making that decision. And so one that always comes to mind is this balance between bias for action and frugality. Oftentimes, you need to spend a lot of money right now because you're going to miss an opportunity if you don't. That's not being frugal, but it's showing a bias for action. Which is it? You can't do both in that circumstance. And I always try to envision, not this time it's not a customer knock at the door, it's the Jeff knock at the door. What are you doing? And why'd you decide to do that? And to be able to say, look, we were presented with this circumstance in which we were going to miss an opportunity if we didn't spend the money right now. We needed to do it. It wasn't frugal. We probably overspent. If we had spread it over 6 months or something, it would have been cheaper. But no, we did it all at once because we were going to miss this opportunity. We wanted to show that bias for action. And if you can explain it to Jeff, to yourself, to say, this was the conscious choice I made, that's great. And that, to me, that's very liberating, to consciously be able to choose among them, but to recognize that you're choosing.
So would you say, when we speak about autonomy, that the autonomy is rather in like the what, basically, but there is quite a big alignment on the how, because what you described, the principles, this is the leadership principles is a how, right? It's something how you do stuff. But like, for example, when there is a unit, like I have to use AWS, right? So when I'm somewhere in Amazon, or can I choose to go to the Google Cloud?
Mm-hmm. So hopefully the AWS services are superior and that we're going to be relying on those services. In fact, if you think about it, we've put our money where our mouth is because we have the entire rest of the company running on AWS. We would never have bet the company this way if we thought that AWS was not capable. And so it turns out there's a very synergistic relationship between Amazon, not AWS, and AWS. We are a big customer of AWS. We're also a very noisy customer, one that demands a lot and screams and shouts if we're not getting what we want. The benefit for a company like yours is that you get the benefits of the services that AWS deploys for Amazon, because Amazon's demanding them, then AWS is making them available to everybody. And so, there is that internal relationship, but we never would have taken the existing going concern, which is a very successful company, and run it all on AWS if we thought there was a risk. There wasn't one.
But you had to be convinced, no? I heard that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, we're not blind, right? So we would want to look. We want to make sure that the products and services that we rely on are ones that allow us to continue to serve our customers. People are making a big deal about the fact that we now have cargo aircraft that we lease. So we have these wide-body jets. We've got, I don't know how many, we're leasing 40 these days, and we have these new shipping companies. We're actually now paying some employees to go off and start their own shipping companies to be able to do the last mile kind of delivery. Is this because we just think we're great? Well, no. It's because we weren't getting the level of service that we needed to fulfill our promises to our customers. And so back in holiday, I think it was 2013, holiday 2013, we missed a lot of our delivery promises because the existing carriers, the ones that have been around for a long time, who we know and love, they just did not have the capacity or the ability to keep up with our demand. So we said, gosh, we got to do something. It's not like we don't like these people, but they're not able to do what we need to have done, so we are going off and doing our own thing. And so there's one of the things that needs to be resisted in a successful enterprise, a successful company like yours or like mine, is the hubris to think that because you're good at one thing that you're going to be good at another. And I mean, you can look at some very prominent politicians right now who think that they're good at everything. You can think of one in particular, I'm sure. And yet, the proof is that no, that not everyone is good at everything, and likewise, no company is good at everything. And so, what you'll often see about Amazon, if you were to ask me, I'm going to give you a question, Paul, what's Amazon going to be doing in 5 or 10 years? And I'll tell you, there's two answers. One is we're going to be a customer-obsessed company. That's not going to change. That's going to be the one constant. That'll be the same 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now, I hope. The other thing is, I think you can sort of start to predict what kinds of products and services we'll do by recognizing what we're doing well internally. And so we have this long history of developing something for a core business, doing it well enough at least, but we'd like to think well, and then making it available to third parties. The first iteration of this was our marketplace, where we started to allow third parties to come on our website and make sales. Wall Street hated this idea. It was anathema to them. They said, wait a minute, you are a retailer, you run stores, and you're going to allow somebody else to come into your store and try to make sales and take sales away from your business? That's crazy. Wall Street hated it. We looked at it and said, no, our customers, our buyer customers will like this because they'll get more selection, they'll see some price competition right on our website, and plus we'll see this new category of customers, these sellers that would come in suddenly. And so it turns out now that well over half of the things sold through Amazon websites are not sold by Amazon. They're sold by somebody else. And so that has really worked out, but that was the first example, really, of where we took an expertise that was working. We had a retail business involving a website and warehouses, and we said, we'll make it available to third parties. And so this has repeated itself. We now have fulfillment by Amazon. We've got these delivery services. We have arguably AWSs in this ballpark because there were systems that we had learned how we had developed to have to support our retail business that now are available to third parties.
I think when we met, did you tell me that you also were one of the first people in that drone project, right?
It's true.
It's true, no?
Yeah.
So, which is of course sounding like a moonshot, at least when you know it's not, because you know all the details. From the outside, it rather sounds like a moonshot. So when will you acknowledge that you have failed with
I
it?
have a mouthful.
No, because I mean, I think it's super, like with these moonshots, I think it's super, super hard to find the moment in time when you really say, now I kill it. Now we have been super passionate about this new mobile phone, and then we find out, no, we can't do it. Yeah. And that must be very painful. And I think it's super, super hard to find that right moment, right?
Yeah.
How do you find the right moment?
It devolves to that customer obsession again. So he alluded to that I was part of the small team, I think there were, 5 or 6 of us, who drafted that initial press release with respect to Amazon Prime Air. This is our future drone delivery service. Notice I say future, it's not current, but it is coming. But there are so many aspects to that project that are really hard. It turns out that navigation by unmanned aerial vehicles or drones is really easy. Drones, navigation's fine. I mean, there's a little chip in here that does navigation just easy, and you just toss it in a drone and it works. The harder part is designing a drone that decides what to do when it gets to the place where it's flying. So it comes in for a customer delivery. What does it decide to do? It has to be entirely autonomous. We don't want these things to be able to be hijacked. So the thing has to be able to think for itself. Nobody is sitting there flying it around, looking at it, or even looking at a monitor flying this thing. These things fly by themselves, entirely autonomous. There's no human involved. And you don't want a human involved because you want the thing to be able to assess the situation, sense and avoid obstacles, and then make decisions about what to do when getting to a location, et cetera. There are all sorts of challenges around battery life and the design of propellers. Who knew we'd be designing propellers at Amazon, but we are. And all these things are really super hard, but, and here's the punchline for this, when drafting that press release, the core of the press release was delivery to a customer within 30 minutes of an order. That was it. Delivery to a customer within 30 minutes of an order. We wanted to figure out a way to do this reliably. Delivery to a customer within 30 minutes of an order. And the fact that it's going by unmanned aerial vehicle that's autonomous and it has sensor fusion and cool propellers that are super quiet and long battery life, all that stuff doesn't matter to customers. They don't care. Again, that's that how thing. The customer does not care. It's going to be cool the first couple times you get a drone delivery. It'll be cool. That'll wear off really fast. What you'll now get, though, is the toothpaste that gets delivered in 20 minutes because you really need a toothpaste. You've got a date and you're not showered. What's your choice? Either don't shower, date arrives and you're smelly, or you don't brush your teeth before the date arrives. Why not be able to shower and have the toothpaste be delivered to you? That is a real serious customer use case. That's what we're after. And all the technology that goes into it, the navigation, the airspace sharing, the battery, the propellers, doesn't really matter.
I will not nail you down on my question, but
Did I avoid that?
I
Well,
realized
you
didn't answer
the wind
it, but
thing.
it's fine.
Coming, future.
So, last question before everybody here wants to leave. Last question. I read yesterday that Jeff's space company, I think, has for the first time hired more people than SpaceX. And so, have you booked your slot already, or?
I'm too old. I'm an old guy, so I probably have missed my opportunity by a couple of decades. But no, seriously, would I do that? Be the first one? I don't think so. I don't think I'm the first guy.
Second, third.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. It'd be really interesting. I mean, so Jeff's approach to Blue Origin, this is his space company, is very similar to his approach to Amazon, which is often providing the infrastructure around which others can be creative. And so he likes to think in these terms that basically says, it's really gratifying and rewarding if you can help other people with their creativity. And so we think about AWS. This is an area where we're providing infrastructure, these products and services across the line of the AWS business, but it allows other people to do stuff on top of it. So I use SageMaker at home with my 17-year-old. The two of us have done some really cool machine learning projects at home. This is the kind of stuff that would not have been at all accessible to us even 5 years ago, certainly not when I was growing up 40 years ago. So the reality is that that these products and services now allow others to do cool things with it. He wants to do the same thing with Blue Origin. Basically, he's not got a single, threaded focus on one particular mission. It's more like if he builds the heavy lifting infrastructure, creative people will figure out a way to use them for space travel, for space mining, agriculture, whatever is out there. It's very real, and so it's very fun to watch too.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
I think it was really amazing to have you here. I wish you best of luck for your tour, for your European tour.
Oh, thank you. Hey, by the way, before we wind up, I just want to know, I'm told that this wall has an error on it. And I looked at the wall for about 3 minutes. Can I take just a guess at what the error is? Does anybody in the room know where the error is? Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think right there you're missing a semicolon. After
Even two?
Right there. No, up here. Right there.
Yeah, no, true.
Might be. Anyway, that was... But the beauty is no one knew. I waited until somebody said that they didn't know. So anyway, go ahead.
Line 16 is missing.
Line 16 is missing. Oh, I thought that was a luck thing. Like there's no 13th floor in a building. There's no line 16. Of course I noticed that.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, of course. That was fun.